All right, everyone, this is Josh from US Recland. Today, what I wanted to go over, I wanted to talk about wetlands, the dirty word. As soon as folks hear the word wetland, they automatically think that the property or the parcel of interest is tainted somehow. Wetlands are the redheaded stepchildren of land acquisition. So today, I just wanted to kind of go through this. And I know folks are just trying to use their best judgment to purchase land, make sure they don't get stuck with a piece of property they don't want, and that's great. But like in many things in life, context matters, and there might be some attributes that you didn't realize were actually positives. In fact, many of you, unbeknownst to yourself, are actually looking to for wetlands. We'll get into it here. So I have a property here I'm going to show you, but I'm just going to leave that up. I just want to touch on some things, some real quick housekeeping, and then a general overview before we talk in detail. Like always, please subscribe to our website, usrecland.com. We do offer subscriber exclusive deals once a month, discounts, flash sales, bundle deals for subscribers only on the website. Just our way of saying thank you for subscribing. And then also, if you don't mind, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Click the bell so you're notified every time we have a new video. We're going to start adding more and more educational content for you too. Not just the listings of the new ads, but obviously we'll add those to YouTube for your convenience while we layer in some more educational content for you. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started on the wetlands. All right. So many of you are looking for properties. Maybe perhaps you've never purchased land before and you don't know much, but you do know that you've heard nobody wants to buy a swamp accidentally. And it's common sense that you might not want a swamp or a wetland area, depending on your utility of the property. Therein lies the key. What is your specific utility? If it's a swamp, can I build a home? Am I going to build a basement below grade? Probably not. But there is a whole litany of utility and uses for land where you actually would want wetland, or at least a portion of your property be wetland. And we'll go through this a little bit, but let's first talk about a wetland. First of all, drainage is natural. It's a natural phenomenon. So you might buy a piece of property and it's not delineated wetland by the National Wetland Registry. But again, it's a natural phenomenon. So if your neighbor to the north, south, east, or west of you has a drainage, quote unquote, wetland, well, if the soil gets inundated and the type of soil there, or mollisoils, or it's high sand and clay, and it gets inundated during a heavy rain in the spring, all of a sudden, guess what you have? A wetland. And let's use that to delve in. A wetland there's a delineation of a wetland, and there's actually gradients to it. At one time, I had my wetland certification, by the way, so I kind of know what I'm talking about here. So I'm just trying to help. So to give you an idea, one of the wetland certification projects we had to do is find a wetland area. And there are many different types of wetland areas, okay? And it's based off the natural topography and the natural drainage. It's kind of both layered over each other. And then the different soil types come into play. Some soil has a very high carrying capacity of water, some has very low. And then there's some that are right in the middle. So again, it's nature. There's always usually a few different versions of it. And that kind of directs how the water flows and drains, creeks, streams, to rivers, to lakes. So that's a perfect example. You folks that want to get property next to the lake, guess what you bought? Guess what you're buying? And you say, well, no, Josh, I walked the property. None of it's wet. It's dry. That's right. But it's still wetland technically. And not many people know that. That's why I said, if we're going to get technical with the wetland delineation, there's gradients. So the actual lake itself is an obvious wetland. There's water. That's the easy part. But as you move away from bodies of water and move up the gradient, you still have, in many cases, one or two gradients outside of the water, the lake or the river, moving up the hill or across the beam. what have you, that is still considered a wetland. And they use the delineation if there's certain plants that like really wet soil, wet fac, and there's different categories of different plants and soil, and they kind of put everything together with soil samples. And even 10 feet up the hill from a lake, quote unquote, it's still a wetland. So you are looking for a wetland property when you are looking for a lakeside, riverside, streamside property, period. That's what you're doing, technically. So now we're getting technical, but you say, well, okay, for technicality's sake, but I just want something close to the water. I just don't want the property to be underwater year round. Fair enough. So, but again, you are looking at a wetland property. So don't be afraid of wetland. It depends on what your use is for the property, and obviously look at the specifics of that property in context. So here's a good example here. This is actually a property that we have up right now. This is in Florida, okay? And from this aerial, you can see there's drainage kind of cutting across the swath of that corner, a natural drainage. And it looks like it's fairly dry, so I'm gonna guess that's probably a seasonal drainage. Maybe there's a trickle in there, even in the summertime. Maybe there's a little bit more water spring and winter, as there's more precipitation coming and inundating the soil, and it can't leach through the soil and percolate through the soil as well. So it sits on top and then flows into the streams, and then the stream enlarges there as it goes through. So in this case, another reason I would want a quote unquote wetland, a river or creek is a wetland, and there's a high water table at width there, is if I'm using this for recreation property to hunt, I want a water source for the animals. I want that. Now, if it's a recreation property, I might want a recreation property to hunt and I want to build. Okay, fair enough. This might not be for you, but just because there's a little creek running through here, or creek, however you say it, that's just not indicative of the rest of this area being a swamp or underwater. In fact, you can see, I mean, there's trees. Trees doesn't necessarily mean that there's not water adsorbed soil, meaning it's basically the soil is running at carrying capacity of water. But again, I don't want to get technical. I just want to kind of speak to some of the myths and things around. As soon as someone sees wetland on a post, they avoid it. It might be the very thing you're looking for, because this area might right here could be 3, 4, 5 feet up from where that creek is, depending on elevation. And you can usually get a topographical map. So that's just nature, rolling, sprawling. This whole property might be roughly the same level. Maybe it is a swamp, but looking at this, it looks like there's a nice riverine here. Okay, and that riverine is a wetland, and moving up the hill is quote unquote a wetland, but you would be standing on perfectly dry ground. Okay, and there are other scenarios where it's just not a big deal if it's quote unquote a wetland, because there's also different delineations of wetland, meaning some are worse than others. You could literally be on top of a hill and it still be a wetland. And you would never guess that it was a wetland. And again, the cues that they use to delineate what's still wet has a lot more to do with the soil and how much water is carried and sits in the water table, soil table. It's not about necessarily how close it is to water or if it's just dry to the foot, to you walking on it. There's a little bit more to it. But let's just kind of break this down. So the wetland is more about the water and its ability to percolate down through the soil quickly. If it can't percolate through the soil quickly, it sits, especially on a clay or a loam. It'll sit up there. Well, if it sits up above and it doesn't percolate down deep below the surface back into the water table fairly quickly, AKA a monsoon rain, etc., well, it has to find a place to go, and it's going to follow the natural contours and elevation and topography of the land. And then you have these seasonal riverines or a creek. Maybe the creek is, it's just a small trickle, but during the winter, it really kicks up with all the precipitation and snow melt. things like that. Then another factor might be is just the overall general low elevation. Like Florida is just a general low elevation. In fact, I believe a lot of the surface area is actually below sea level, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're just already in a generally very low elevation place, you have a high water table by virtue of that anyway. But obviously you would still look for wetlands, even in the north. We're in Ohio here. I would still look for a wetland. If I was looking to build a cabin in the woods, I definitely want to look and see, if I go walk this, is it a big swamp? And you would have that problem. But again, just because there's a creek on the property or a water source, and oftentimes we want to buy close to that water source because we enjoy that, or we want that for game, a water source for the deer, turkeys, and animals and things coming in to go fishing. That's not necessarily a deal killer. It's within context of the utility that you want to use the property for. And there's a myriad of those. One fellow wanted to look at a property for a paintball to take his paintball clients on. So he's looking for a recreation property. I don't think he really cares too much. I mean, I don't know that he wants a swamp with 3 or 4 foot deep water, but if it was a little muddy, might add to the character and appeal of it. I don't know. I don't know how bad they want to play Army. So I just wanted to go through the wetlands and just to kind of get people, just because you see a wetland delineation at the county, or a lot of times my partner Matt, he will put the National Wetland Registry wetland map, and folks will be gung-ho about a property and they'll see that the next property over is a wetland. Well, the property, it doesn't see any water. It doesn't have any water. There's no water sitting on it, but it's designated as a wetland by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers oversees that. But it's just because it's designated a wetland, it could be dry as a bone. It just has a lot of what they call water-loving trees and plants that designate it as a wetland, because the soil beneath, maybe a foot or two, is still technically pretty wet compared relatively to other soils. But if you were to walk on it, you wouldn't be walking in mud, you'd be walking in a normal surface. So I don't want to beat a dead horse. I just want everybody to kind of understand, because there's properties that we would buy all day that are wetland that folks would be worried about. Well, it depends on what you're buying it for. That's the important piece. And oh, by the way, there's a great opportunity there for you folks that are looking for hunting and fishing properties, recreation properties to ride ATVs and things. If you can find a property and a good portion of it is a wetland, and it really does have standing water. Again, standing water isn't that, it can not have any standing water and still be considered wetland as delineated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But that would be great for you. That would be a favorable thing to have on the property. Or the other part of that is a creek or a lake or a pond. If you have a property, that's a source of water. If you were in a situation with scarcity, obviously you need to get a rolling boil for, what is it, 23 minutes? But it's still a water source for you in an emergency situation. But just wanted everyone to kind of chill on the wetlands. No, you don't want to build your house in the middle of a swamp with 4 foot of standing water and trees with buttresses. No, you don't. But just because it says wetland doesn't mean that's the case. The whole property could be a wetland, and you could walk the whole thing, every foot of it, and never even step in a moist area of soil. And it could still be delineated wetland. So when you're looking at charts like a national wetland, or you look at the aerial and you see that maybe over to the side there's a river and you're concerned that that property is going to be high water table, well, you can't always see the elevation and topography. Okay, you can't always see that, and there are limitations to satellite. We use them a lot. We like it. You can kind of see, and then you can, if you're in the area, you can walk the property. So that's always a good idea. Sometimes it's not that convenient to do that, but that's not a bad idea at all either. But I just want everybody to understand that wetlands aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, in some cases, it's exactly what you're looking for, and it's one of the selling points to the property, believe it or not. All right. Well, we've gone on enough here, so do not fear the wetlands, Yoda. But if anyone has any questions or would be interested, actually, this property is still up for sale. This is in Volusia County, Florida. If anybody's interested in this, like I said, it's got that nice little riverine area that is a wetland coming through there. You can see the pin on the property. So you've got it coming right down through there. It looks like a little seasonal trickle there. Feel free to give us a call. Again, you can find us on usrecland.com. Please subscribe for exclusive subscriber deals each month. And then also subscribe on the YouTube channel, and also click the bell. That way you'll be notified as soon as we have new content. And like I said, we're going to start scaling up, and we'll push some more educational content. So that way we're not blasting you guys all the time trying to sell you something, which we don't like either. It's just a necessary evil of business. So we'll try to push more stuff. So that way, when you do get to the point to buy that perfect piece of land, you already know how to perform your due diligence and look at the property under the right light. And that way you won't miss any deals. But these are great opportunities to get a great deal because so many people don't understand what I just explained, just that simple few concepts and ideals of what a wetland really is and what it really means. And it's not necessarily a bad word. In some cases it is, a few cases, but it's not always a bad word. It's a great opportunity for you to find the perfect recreation property, hunting property, shooting, camping, ATVs. It's perfect opportunity to find a property like that for a great price. So if those are the types of things you're looking for, you should even look for wetlands. Maybe not completely inundated with water, but it's actually a perk if there's a certain area that's considered wetland, quote unquote. A wetland could be dry year round, still be a wetland. All right, I've beat the horse dead and his mother and his father. All right, this is Josh for US Recland, over and out. Thanks, everyone.